Sunday morning after my walk, I went outside to cut the grass. And when I started mowing, it was early enough that the air felt good, fresh, cooler than it would be later on. I live in Florida, so the cool air doesn't last very long during the summer months. As the morning went on, the temperature started climbing, and I was sweating, really sweating. By the time I finished cutting the grass, you would think I would have walked back into the house completely exhausted. But I didn't. I felt refreshed. Rejuvenated, actually. And the interesting thing is, I didn't notice it while I was working. It wasn't until the job was finished that I realized I feel really good. I had walked that morning. Then I had spent more time outside cutting the grass. I was hot. I was sweaty. I had been working, but somehow I felt better than I had before I started. And I started thinking about the air. Because there is something about fresh air, especially that early morning air, that just doesn't compare to the air coming through the vents in my house. Now, don't misunderstand me. I live in Florida. I did go back inside to my air conditioner. But there's a difference between cool air and fresh air. And that morning reminded me of one of God's natural laws that is so ordinary that most of us probably don't even think about it. Fresh air. We don't have to remember to breathe. We don't schedule breathing into our calendars. We don't wake up and say, okay, I need to make sure I breathe today. Our bodies just do it. In, out. In, out. All day, all night. And maybe because breathing happens without our permission, we don't think very much about what we're breathing, or how much of our lives we now spend separated from the outdoor air God created for us. Think about the average day. You wake up inside, the windows may be closed. You walk outside long enough to get into your car, close the door, turn on the air conditioning, drive to work, walk inside, spend hours there, get back into your car, drive home, walk inside, close the door. And depending on the season, either the air conditioner is running or the heat is running. House, car, office, store, car, house. And we can move through almost an entire day without spending meaningful time outdoors. That was one of the things that struck me while preparing this episode. The EPA estimates that Americans spend about 90% of their time indoors. And indoor spaces contain all sorts of things that can affect the air. Cooking emissions, cleaning products, furnishings, moisture, dust, and other contaminants. Now that doesn't mean your house is poisoning you. And it doesn't mean air conditioning is bad. It doesn't mean heating is bad. Modern heating and cooling protects us from dangerous temperatures. The issue is much simpler. Ventilation. Are we getting appropriate outdoor air into our indoor environments? Because an air conditioner can cool air, a furnace can heat air, a fan can move air, but moving air and exchanging air are not necessarily the same thing. And more than 100 years ago, Ellen G. White was writing about this very subject. In the Ministry of Healing, Ellen White wrote, "The lungs are constantly throwing off impurities, and they need to be constantly supplied with fresh air." She warned against what she called closed, ill-ventilated rooms. And she didn't just talk about houses. She talked about bedrooms, churches, schoolrooms. She connected poor ventilation with drowsiness, dullness, and difficulty concentrating. Think about that. That wasn't written after somebody installed a carbon dioxide monitor in her bedroom. She wasn't reading the latest research on indoor quality. Yet she was telling people, pay attention to the air. And now, modern researchers have begun asking some fascinating questions about what happens when we don't pay attention to the air. Researchers have actually put people into controlled office environments and change the quality and ventilation of the air around them. Then they tested how well those people performed on tasks involving things like decision-making, problem-solving, planning, and concentration. And here's what I want you to hear. When participants worked under conditions with better indoor air quality, their cognitive performance improved. And when more fresh outdoor air was brought into the room, the participants performed even better. Now, please don't walk away saying, Inez said opening my window will make me smarter. I did not say that. That's not what the research proves. But it does raise an important question. Have you ever been sitting in a crowded room for a long time and suddenly you felt sleepy, heavy, foggy, like you just couldn't concentrate? And maybe you thought, I'm just tired. Maybe you were. But researchers are also asking, what's happening in the room? And suddenly, Ellen White's counsel about ventilation in churches and schoolrooms doesn't sound quite so old-fashioned. It sounds remarkably practical. There's another place I hadn't thought much about before researching this, the bedroom. We may spend 7 or 8 hours in there every night, door closed, window closed, sometimes another person is sleeping beside us, and everybody is breathing all night. Researchers studying actual bedrooms have found that when ventilation improved, indoor carbon dioxide and some other pollutants decreased. And in some studies, aspects of sleep improved as well. Other research manipulating bedroom ventilation has also found differences in sleep under better and poorer ventilated conditions. Now again, I don't want us turning a principle into a ritual. This does not mean everybody listening to Law & Order must sleep with the window open tonight. No, there are places where that would be unwise. There may be pollution outside, wildfire smoke, extreme temperatures, high pollen, noise, safety concerns. The principle isn't open the window. The principle is pay attention to the air you breathe. And that leads to something much bigger than opening a window. The morning I was outside cutting my grass, I wasn't thinking about a scientific study. I wasn't measuring carbon dioxide. I wasn't thinking about ventilation rates. I was just outside. And maybe that's why the experience stayed with me. Because sometimes we become so accustomed to the way we live that we stop asking whether the environment we've created is actually the environment in which the human body thrives best. And this brings me to something else Ellen White wrote about extensively: country living. Ellen White didn't simply describe country living as a nice alternative for people who prefer trees and open spaces. She repeatedly urged God's people, and especially families raising children, to leave the crowded cities when they were able and establish their homes in the country. Why? Because environment matters. She wrote about the benefits of fresh air, sunlight, contact with nature, useful outdoor work, and the opportunity for children to grow and learn away from many of the influences and pressures of city life. And standing outside that morning cutting my grass, I began to understand that counsel a little differently. I wasn't trying to obey 5 different health laws. I was simply living my life. Yet, while I was outside, I was exercising. I was breathing fresh air. I was getting sunlight. I was surrounded by growing things. I was doing useful physical work. The environment itself made obedience to several of God's natural laws easier. And that made me wonder whether sometimes we make obedience harder because we are trying to practice God's principles while remaining in environments that constantly work against them. Perhaps that is the part of wisdom behind God's counsel. He wasn't merely telling his people where to live. He was leading them toward a way of life where some of the very things the body needs are no longer another item on the schedule. They're simply part of the day. And that's when something clicked for me. Sometimes obedience doesn't add to the strain of life. Sometimes obedience is God's way of reducing it. And this is where law and order always brings me back. When Christians hear the word obedience, we often think immediately about the 10 Commandments. But throughout this series, we've been looking at something larger. God's universe operates according to law, and there are consequences attached to how we live. Think about inertia. An object doesn't need to understand Newton's first law in order to obey it. Set something in motion, and it will continue in motion unless another force acts upon it. You don't have to know the law. You don't have to believe in the law. The law operates. And the laws governing our bodies are no different. I can sincerely love God and consistently deprive myself of sleep. My sincerity doesn't replace the sleep. I can pray for strength while refusing to drink water. Prayer does not make water unnecessary. I can read my Bible every morning while ignoring what I'm learning about caring for my body. And eventually my body responds. Not because God is standing over me, waiting to punish me, but because law has consequences. And I think sometimes we look at God's instructions as though He is constantly adding restrictions to our lives. Don't do this, do that. Go here, don't go there. But what if some of those instructions are actually designed to reduce the strain of life? What if God sees pressures we don't see? What if He understands what an environment will eventually do to the body, to the mind, to the family, long before we understand the science behind it? Then obedience begins to look different. It isn't God trying to make life harder. It may actually be God showing us a better way to live. And somebody listening may be thinking, well, that's wonderful, Inez, but I live in an apartment in the middle of a city. Okay, then start where you are, because the natural law of fresh air doesn't belong only to the people with acreage. You don't need a lawn to mow. You don't need a garden. You don't need a porch. You don't need to move tomorrow. You simply need to begin paying attention. When the outdoor air quality and weather are appropriate, maybe you open your windows for a while. Take the walk. Sit outside. Step outdoors during lunch. Let the children play outside. Use your kitchen exhaust when you're cooking. Use your bathroom ventilation when you're creating moisture. Maintain your HVAC system. Change the appropriate filters. And when the outside air isn't healthy, use wisdom. Keep the smoke out. Keep dangerous heat out. Keep dangerous cold out. Use filtration where appropriate. This isn't about rejecting technology. It's about using technology without forgetting biology. I like that, because God gave us intelligence too. And for me, sometimes what I like to do is just leave a small crack in my windows, just to make sure that some natural, fresh air is coming in. But that's what I do. And after all the research and all the studies, all the discussion about ventilation, I keep coming back to something incredibly simple. Before there were hospitals, there was air. Before pharmacies, air. Before supplements, air. Before air purifiers, air. Before HVAC systems, air. Before human beings invented a single health product, there was air. Genesis 2:7 says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." Breath. Life begins with breath, and when life ends, breath stops. Maybe something so ordinary has become invisible to us precisely because God made it abundant. Think about it. We notice what costs money. We notice what comes in a bottle. We notice what arrives in a package. We notice the newest supplement, the newest treatment, the newest machine. But nobody sends us a monthly invoice for sunlight. Nobody charges admission for sleep. Nobody sends us a bill every time we take a breath. And perhaps because these things are free, we mistake them for being cheap. They're not. They're priceless. So I'm going to leave you with something very simple this week. If you're able, spend at least 15 intentional minutes outside each day. Not walking from the house to the car. not standing outside while you're waiting for somebody. Be outside. Take a walk. Sit on the porch. Work in the garden if you have one. Cut the grass if you have a lawn. Let the children play. And while you're there, pay attention. Breathe. Notice the air. Notice how you feel. And then look at the places where you spend most of your day. Your bed, your office, your classroom, your home. Ask yourself, am I paying attention to the air I breathe? You don't have to overhaul your life tonight. Just begin with awareness. And maybe that's one of the beautiful things about obedience. Sometimes obedience asks something difficult of us. But sometimes obedience actually removes a burden we didn't realize we were carrying. Sometimes God isn't adding another thing to our lives. He's inviting us back to something He already provided. Fresh air. I'm Inez Reyes, and this is Law & Order. If today's episode encouraged you, visit blessedimpressionsmedia.com for this week's companion article, where we'll take this conversation further with practical ways to bring more fresh air and healthy ventilation into everyday life. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Law & Order and join me next week as we continue discovering how God's natural laws point us back to the wisdom of our Creator.